Lightning split the purple sky of storm as Captain Stone stood at the command center's viewing window. His thick, gray-scaled skin reflected the flash, and he unconsciously shifted his weight on his powerful legs, built for their world's crushing gravity. Another day of electrical storms and acid rain on their home planet, just like every other day for the past 1,000 years. The planet Storm hadn't earned its name by accident. It was a world of constant violence, where the very air tried to kill you, and the gravity could crush lesser beings. The Durex had evolved here, grown strong here, and eventually mastered this harsh environment through their technology and natural strength. They were proud of this fact, perhaps too proud, as they would soon learn. Captain Stone turned away from the window as his second-in-command, Officer Reed, entered the room. Like all Durex, Reed moved with the careful precision of a species used to controlling their strength. Their powerful bodies, evolved to handle 2.3 times standard gravity, made them the strongest known species in the mapped galaxy. Captain, the scout ships have found something interesting in Sector 7. Reed reported, his voice deep and rumbling. A new civilization on a previously unmarked world. Stone's vertical pupils widened slightly, the Durex equivalent of raising eyebrows. "Show me," he ordered, moving to the central display table. The holographic display flickered to life, showing a blue and green planet. Stone studied it with growing disbelief. The planet's weather patterns were chaos given form. Massive storms in some regions, burning deserts in others, and ice caps at the poles. The gravity was lighter than storms, but the environment was wildly unstable. How could anything survive there? Stone wondered aloud. The temperature ranges are extreme. Look at these readings, from burning hot to freezing cold. And these storms. He paused, watching the movement of massive hurricane systems. Are there really intelligent beings living in these conditions? Reed nodded, bringing up more detailed scans. They call themselves humans. And here's the truly unbelievable part. They live everywhere on their planet. Not just in the temperate zones, but in the frozen wastes, the burning deserts, even in regions with regular volcanic activity. Stone's tail twitched, a sign of deep thought among his people. Without environmental suits, he asked, already knowing the answer would surprise him. Minimal protection at most. They've built cities in almost every climate zone. They swim in their oceans, climb their highest mountains, and even venture into their most extreme deserts, all with nothing more than basic clothing. The captain stared at the readings again. According to their initial scans, these humans were physically weaker than almost any spacefaring race they'd encountered. Their bodies seemed almost fragile. No natural armor, no significant physical strengths, moderate sensory capabilities at best. Perhaps they're highly advanced technologically, Stone suggested, trying to make sense of it all. Superior force field technology or environmental control systems. Reed shook his head. That's another surprising thing. They're relatively new to space travel. Most of their survival appears to be through natural adaptation and simple tools. They don't even have gravity control technology yet. Stone fell silent, watching the planet rotate in the display. His people had always believed that their world had made them superior. The harsh gravity of storm had given them strength. Its constant electrical storms had forced them to develop advanced technology. The acid rains had led to their thick, protective skin. Every challenge had made them stronger, or so they thought. But here was a species that faced not one harsh environment, but dozens. Not one survival challenge, but hundreds. And they didn't just survive. According to these readings, they thrived. "Prepare a first contact team," Stone ordered finally. "I want to see these humans for myself." And Reed. He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Let's keep our usual pride in check. I have a feeling we might learn something unexpected from these creatures." As Reed left to carry out his orders, Stone turned back to the window, watching another lightning storm rage across the surface of Storm. For the first time in his life, he wondered if perhaps his people's definition of harsh needed to be reconsidered. Something told him that these humans were about to change everything the Durex thought they knew about survival, strength, and adaptation. The scout ships were already preparing for their approach to Earth. Soon, they would learn just how wrong they had been about what made a species truly strong. The Durex ships descended through Earth's atmosphere, their advanced shields handling the entry with ease. Captain Stone watched from the command deck as they approached their chosen landing site, a place humans called New York. The city below stretched out like a forest of metal and glass, surprisingly tall for a species living in standard gravity. "Remarkable," Officer Reed muttered, standing beside his captain. "They build these structures despite regular windstorms and something they call hurricanes." He checked his datapad. "And this is one of their moderate climate zones." Their ships landed in a cleared area called Central Park, where human authorities had prepared for their arrival. Stone had expected to see humans wrapped in protective gear, hiding from their world's harsh elements. Instead, he saw them standing in the open air, some wearing nothing more than light cloth coverings despite the cold winter temperature. The landing ramp lowered, and Stone led his crew out. They wore their standard environmental suits, necessary for any world other than storm. The gravity felt uncomfortably light, making each step feel like they might bounce too high. A group of humans approached them, led by a man who stood straight and confident. "Welcome to Earth," the man said, showing his teeth in what Stone's cultural briefing had explained was a friendly gesture called a smile. "I'm Tom Walker, Earth's diplomatic representative. We hope you'll find your stay here enlightening." Stone noticed something odd about Tom's face. It was tanned and weathered, showing signs of regular exposure to the elements. This wasn't someone who hid from their world's challenges. "Thank you for your welcome," Stone replied through his suit's translator. "We are surprised by your ability to stand in these conditions without protection." Tom laughed, a sound that made several Durex crew members step back. It's just a mild winter day, around 40 degrees Fahrenheit. You should see Chicago in January. Now that's cold." The Durex team spent the next several hours touring the city. They learned that humans not only survived in their varying conditions, but had built different cultures around them. They saw videos of humans living in places called Alaska, where temperatures dropped far below freezing, and others thriving in the Sahara Desert, where daytime temperatures could cook the Durex even in their suits. "But how do you handle such extreme variations?" Reed asked as they watched footage of humans climbing the tallest mountain on Earth. Tom's answer was simple but profound. "We adapt. Our bodies are remarkably good at it. Most humans can, with proper preparation and determination, survive almost anywhere on Earth. We don't need special suits or genetic modifications. Just knowledge, preparation, and the will to survive." The revelation hit Stone like a physical blow. His people had evolved to survive one specific type of harsh environment, becoming physically powerful but inflexible. Humans, by contrast, had evolved to adapt to any environment, trading raw strength for incredible versatility. They watched more footage. Humans diving in deep oceans, running marathons in desert heat, building homes in tropical rainforests, and surviving in frozen tundra. Each environment seemed more challenging than the last, yet humans had found ways to not just survive, but build civilizations in all of them. "Tomorrow," Tom said as their tour ended, "we'd like to show you something really interesting. Have you ever heard of extreme sports?" Stone hadn't, but the gleam in Tom's eye made him nervous. The humans weren't just surviving their harsh world. They were challenging it for fun. They created sports that pushed their limits, deliberately seeking out and conquering new environmental challenges. As Stone and his crew returned to their ships for the night, he found himself reconsidering everything he thought he knew about strength and survival. His people had mastered their world through power and technology. But humans, they had mastered their world by mastering themselves. "Captain," Reed said quietly as they prepared for rest cycle, "I think we may have underestimated these humans." Stone looked out at the city lights twinkling in the darkness, thinking about all they had seen. "No, Reed," he replied. "We didn't just underestimate them. We completely failed to understand what true adaptation means, and something tells me they're just getting started with their surprises." The morning brought what Tom had promised, a demonstration of human extreme sports. The Durex watched in stunned silence as videos played showing humans jumping from flying vehicles with nothing but thin fabric to slow their fall. Others rode boards down snow-covered mountains, dove into deep ocean caves, or climbed sheer cliff faces with minimal equipment. "This is entertainment for you?" Stone asked, his translator barely hiding his disbelief. "You deliberately seek out dangerous situations." "Of course," Tom replied with that strange human smile. "It's how we push our limits, learn what we're capable of." He paused the video on an image of a human running through something called an ultramarathon in Death Valley, which brings me to my proposal. Stone noticed a shift in Tom's demeanor. The easygoing diplomat was now fully focused, serious. Several other human officials had joined them in the meeting room, along with the key members of the Durex delegation. "We know the Durex consider themselves the galaxy's ultimate survivors," Tom continued. "Your achievements on Storm are impressive, but we believe humanity has something unique to offer the galactic community: our adaptability. So we propose a challenge." Officer Reed's tail twitched with interest. "What kind of challenge?" "A survival challenge. 1 month. 2 teams, 1 Durex, 1 human. We'll visit Earth's most extreme environments. No advanced technology allowed. Only basic tools and survival gear that both teams can use equally." The Durex delegation burst into murmurs. Stone studied Tom's face carefully. "You want us to compete without our environmental suits? That would be suicide for my people." "No suits for either team," Tom clarified. "Basic protective clothing only, the kind humans have used for thousands of years. We'll visit 5 locations: the Sahara Desert, the Siberian wilderness, the Amazon rainforest, the Himalayan mountains, and the Antarctic coast. 1 week at each, with 2 days of travel time between locations." Stone felt a mix of shock and intrigue. "You expect us to survive these environments without our technology?" "That's exactly what we expect," Tom replied. "Because that's what humans have been doing since before we had any technology at all. We walked out of Africa, spread across continents, survived ice ages, and thrived in every corner of this planet. Not through superior strength or advanced technology, but through adaptation and determination." A young human diplomat named Jack stepped forward. "Think about it, Captain. If we succeed, both our species learn valuable lessons about survival. If we fail together, but we fail trying to understand each other better." Stone looked at his crew. Reed was practically vibrating with excitement. The challenge appealed to the Durex pride. But there was more at stake here than pride. This was a chance to learn something fundamental about survival itself. "The Durex Council will need to approve this," Stone said finally. "But speaking for my crew, we're interested. Who would lead the human team?" Tom grinned. "I would. I've spent my life studying traditional survival techniques from cultures around the world." "And you?" "Commander Reed," Stone decided. "He's our best survival specialist, trained in both Storm's harshest regions and other worlds." The next few hours were spent discussing details. The humans provided data about each location: temperatures, terrain, available resources, potential dangers. The Durex were particularly concerned about the temperature swings, which were more extreme than anything on Storm. "We'll teach you basic survival techniques before we start," Tom assured them. "And we'll have emergency extraction teams standing by if anything goes wrong. This isn't about proving superiority. It's about learning from each other." As the meeting ended, Stone pulled Tom aside. "Why are you really doing this?" he asked. "You must know how dangerous it could be." Tom's answer was simple but powerful. "Because the galaxy needs to understand something about humans. We're not the strongest, fastest, or most technologically advanced species. But we are the most adaptable. And in a universe as vast and varied as ours, adaptability might be the most important strength of all. Stone looked out the window at the city beyond, where humans went about their lives in the cold winter air as if it was nothing unusual. Perhaps, he thought, they were about to learn just how much nothing unusual humans could handle. The week before the challenge began was filled with preparation. The Durex Council had approved the competition, though many thought it was foolish to handicap themselves by giving up their advanced technology. Commander Reed spent hours studying the environments they would face, his expression growing more concerned with each report. "Look at these temperature swings," Reed said to his team, pointing at the data screen. "The desert goes from burning hot in the day to nearly freezing at night. How do they expect us to regulate our body temperature without thermal controls?" Tom and his human team were practicing nearby, packing and unpacking simple bags with basic gear. Their equipment looked primitive to the Durex: ropes made of plant fibers, clothes made of animal fur and woven cloth, tools made of simple metal and wood. No power sources, no environmental controls, no advanced materials. "These are the same basic tools humans have used for thousands of years," Tom explained when Reed asked about their simple gear. "Fire, shelter, warm clothes, and knowledge. That's all we've ever needed." The Durex team struggled during the training sessions. Their powerful bodies, built for Storm's crushing gravity, tired quickly in Earth's lighter gravity when doing physical labor. Their thick skin, perfect for resisting acid rain, made it harder for them to cool down through sweating like humans did. "You're thinking about this wrong," Tom said, watching Reed struggle to start a fire with friction. "You're trying to overpower the wood. Fire isn't about strength. It's about patience and understanding the materials." Reed looked at his raw hands, then at Tom's careful movements. The human made it look easy, creating flame from nothing but wood and knowledge. It was a humbling experience for a species that had mastered nuclear fusion. Captain Stone visited both teams regularly, watching their preparations with growing interest. He noticed how the humans spent as much time teaching and sharing knowledge as they did practicing skills. They taught the Durex team about finding water in the desert, staying warm in the cold, and building shelters from natural materials. "Your species confuses me," Stone admitted to Tom one evening. "You have the technology to avoid all this. You could live in climate-controlled cities, never facing these extremes. Why don't you?" Tom was showing a young Durex crew member how to tie knots in rope. "Because that's not who we are," he replied. "Humans don't just survive. We explore, we adapt, we overcome. It's not about having the power to avoid challenges. It's about having the skill to face them." The night before the challenge was set to begin, both teams gathered for a final meal. The humans ate their food with obvious enjoyment, while the Durex picked carefully at the strange Earth nutrients their medical team had approved. "Tomorrow we start in the Sahara," Tom announced to the group. "Remember, this isn't about winning or losing. It's about learning from each other, about understanding different ways to survive." Reed looked at his team's worried faces and stood up. "The humans are right," he said, his translator conveying his determined tone. "We've relied on our technology and natural strength for too long. Perhaps it's time we learned a different kind of strength." Later that night, Stone found Tom standing outside, looking at the stars. "Do you really think we can survive all these environments without our technology?" he asked. Tom smiled in that strange human way. "Captain, humans crossed oceans in wooden boats, crossed deserts on foot, and climbed the highest mountains with nothing but courage and determination. We did it all before we had any advanced technology. The question isn't whether it's possible. The question is whether your people are ready to learn a new way of thinking about survival." As Stone returned to his ship for the last night before the challenge, he thought about Tom's words. His people had mastered their harsh world through power and technology. But perhaps true mastery wasn't about dominating an environment. Perhaps it was about learning to live within it, to become part of it rather than fighting against it. Tomorrow would begin to answer that question, one way or another. The Sahara Desert stretched endlessly before them, a sea of golden sand under a merciless sun. Both teams stood at their starting point, each carrying only basic supplies. The Durex team looked uncomfortable in their simple clothing, their thick skin already growing hot under the desert sun. "First task," Tom announced, shouldering his pack easily, "is finding water and shelter before the day gets too hot. We have 6 hours before the worst heat begins." Reed led his team forward, their powerful legs struggling in the soft sand. They had studied desert survival extensively during their preparation, but actually being here was different. The heat was unlike anything they had experienced on Storm, dry and intense, seeming to suck the moisture from their bodies. The human team moved with surprising efficiency, walking with a steady pace that covered ground without wasting energy. Tom showed both teams how to walk on the sand dunes, stepping in a way that prevented sinking. The Durex tried to copy the technique, but their heavier bodies made it difficult. By midday, the heat had become brutal. The Durex team was struggling, their bodies not designed for this kind of temperature. They watched in amazement as Tom's team dug into the sand at the base of the dune, creating a shelter from the sun. "The sand here is cooler," Tom explained, showing them how to reinforce the shelter walls. "We'll rest during the hottest part of the day, then move again when it's cooler. That's how desert peoples have survived for thousands of years." Reed's team helped build the shelter, learning through doing. Their superior strength made the digging easier, but they had to learn to be careful not to collapse the walls. It was a new kind of challenge for them, using strength with precision rather than just raw power. As they rested in the shelter, Tom taught them about finding water. He showed them how to look for signs of water beneath the surface, how certain plants indicated moisture, and how to collect water from the air itself using simple cloth sheets at night. "Your world has constant storms," Tom said to Reed, "but you never had to search for water. Here, water is life, and finding it is an art passed down through generations." That night, as the temperature dropped dramatically, both teams huddled around a small fire. The Durex were shocked by how quickly the heat had turned to cold. Their bodies, used to Storm's consistent temperatures, struggled to adjust. "How do you handle such extreme changes?" Reed asked, watching his breath mist in the cold desert air. "Our bodies are incredibly adaptable," Tom explained, showing them how to wrap cloth to trap body heat. "We can't match your raw strength, but we can adjust to almost any condition given time and knowledge." The next few days brought more lessons. The human team showed the Durex how to find food in seemingly empty desert, how to read the stars for navigation, and how to predict weather changes from wind patterns. The Durex found themselves learning more than just survival skills. They were learning a whole new way of thinking about their relationship with their environment. On the 4th day, a sandstorm approached. The Durex team panicked initially. On Storm, such storms would be deadly without protection. But Tom's team quickly showed them how to create emergency shelters, using the sand itself as protection. "Your instinct is to fight against the environment," Tom said as they waited out the storm. "Our way is to work with it, to understand it, to become part of it. The desert isn't our enemy, it's our teacher." Reed watched the sand swirling outside their shelter, thinking about those words. On Storm, they had conquered their environment through technology and force. But here was a different kind of strength, the strength of adaptation, of understanding, of working with nature rather than against it. As the first week drew to a close, the Durex team had changed. They moved differently now, more carefully, more aware of their surroundings. They had learned to value water in a way their storm-swept world had never taught them. Most importantly, they had begun to understand that true survival wasn't about dominating an environment. It was about becoming part of it. After surviving the Amazon rainforest and the Siberian wilderness, both teams now faced their greatest challenge, the Himalayas. The mountains stretched toward the sky like giant teeth, their peaks lost in swirling clouds. The thin air at this altitude was already making the Durex team uncomfortable. The real challenge here isn't just the cold. Tom explained as they prepared their climbing gear. "It's the lack of oxygen. Even humans struggle to survive at these heights without time to adjust." Reed looked at the basic climbing equipment with doubt. After weeks of challenges, his team had learned to trust human methods, but this seemed impossible. They were about to climb the world's highest mountains with nothing but ropes, picks, and layers of warm clothing. The first day of climbing taught them new meanings of cold. Even storm's worst storms hadn't prepared them for this bone-chilling mountain air. The human team showed them how to create shelters in the snow, building what they called igloos that trapped body heat surprisingly well. "Your body has to work harder here," Tom said, showing them how to breathe properly in the thin air. "Every step takes more effort. That's why the local people here say the mountain must be approached with respect, not conquered by force." On the third day, disaster struck. The Durex team's outer layers of clothing, designed based on their own biology, began to fail in the extreme cold. Their thick skin, usually an advantage, was working against them, trapping the cold instead of keeping it out. Reed noticed one of his team members, Lynn, starting to move sluggishly. "Something's wrong," Reed called out, his voice barely carrying through the howling wind. "Lynn's not responding normally." Tom's team sprang into action with practiced efficiency. They quickly got Lynn into a shelter, but her condition was getting worse. The Durex's natural resistance to temperature changes, usually a strength on storm, was preventing her body from adapting to the extreme cold. "We need to warm her core temperature," Tom said, his face serious. "But your biology is different from ours. Our normal methods might not work." That's when Reed remembered something from their preparation training. "The local people," he said suddenly. "You said they've lived here for thousands of years. How do they survive these conditions?" Tom's eyes lit up with understanding. He pulled out several packets of a dark, butter-like substance. "This is yak butter tea. The mountain peoples use it to maintain body heat. We need to adapt it for your biology." Working together, the human and Durex teams combined their knowledge. They used the humans' understanding of mountain survival with the Durex's knowledge of their own biology. They modified the traditional mountain remedy, making it safe for Durex consumption. Hours passed as they fought to save Lynn's life. The humans taught the Durex team how to share body heat effectively, how to create better insulation from available materials, and how to recognize the early signs of cold weather problems. Finally, Lynn's condition stabilized. As she recovered, both teams huddled in the shelter, sharing warmth and stories. The Durex team listened with new respect as Tom explained how mountain peoples had survived these conditions for countless generations. "Our technology on Storm lets us ignore our environment," Reed said thoughtfully, watching the snow fall outside. "But here, you have to understand it, work with it, respect its power." Tom nodded. "That's what we've been trying to show you. Humans don't survive because we're the strongest or have the best technology. We survive because we learn, adapt, and work together. Every environment on Earth has taught us something different." The next day, as they continued their climb, the Durex team moved differently. They weren't trying to fight the mountain anymore. Instead, they followed the humans' lead, moving with careful respect for the environment. They had learned that sometimes the strongest approach wasn't to overpower a challenge, but to adapt to it. As they reached their target altitude, Reed looked back at the path they'd climbed. His team had nearly lost a member, but they'd gained something invaluable, a new understanding of what true survival meant. It wasn't about being the strongest or most technologically advanced. It was about being able to adapt, to learn, and most importantly, to work together. The Antarctic Challenge had ended, and both teams gathered in New York, where their journey had begun 1 month ago. The room was filled with officials from both species, but the atmosphere was different now. Gone was the initial skepticism and pride. In its place was a deep mutual respect born from shared struggles and survival. Captain Stone stood at the front of the room, looking at the changed faces of both teams. Reed's team no longer carried themselves with the stiff pride of their species. They moved more freely now, more adaptably, having learned to work with different environments rather than trying to overpower them. When we first arrived on Earth, Stone began, addressing the gathered crowd. We thought we knew what it meant to be strong. We thought surviving our harsh world of storm made us superior. He paused, looking at Tom's team. We were wrong. The humans and Durex in the room listened intently as Stone continued. True strength isn't about having the toughest skin or the strongest muscles. It's not about having the most advanced technology. It's about something humans have mastered over thousands of years. The ability to adapt, to learn, to survive not by fighting against nature, but by understanding it. Reed stepped forward, standing beside his friend Lynn, who had nearly lost her life in the Himalayas. In the desert, we learned that survival isn't about brute force. It's about patience and wisdom. In the rainforest, we learned that the most dangerous things aren't always the biggest or strongest. In Siberia, we learned that survival knowledge passed down through generations is more valuable than any technology we could create. Tom nodded, remembering their shared struggles. And in the mountains, he added, we learned that combining our different types of knowledge makes us all stronger. The Durex's understanding of their own biology, combined with our traditional mountain survival techniques, saved Lynn's life. The room fell silent as images played on the wall. Both teams working together to build shelters, find food, navigate harsh terrain. The Durex Council members watched with particular interest as their people learned to move like humans, adapting to each new environment with growing skill. This challenge wasn't about proving which species was better, Stone continued. It was about learning from each other. The humans showed us that true survival isn't about dominating an environment. It's about becoming part of it, about understanding it so deeply that you can live within it, not just survive against it. Lynn stepped forward, her voice strong despite her earlier brush with death. On Storm, we built technology to protect us from our world. But humans showed us a different way. They taught us to read the wind, to understand the movement of water, to see patterns in nature that we never noticed before. They showed us that every environment, no matter how harsh, has its own balance. Tom smiled, remembering the changes he'd seen in the Durex team. And we learned from you too, he said. Your analytical approach helped us understand our own survival techniques better. Sometimes it takes an outside perspective to truly appreciate what you know. Stone looked out at the gathered crowd, seeing hope for both species' future. Today we propose a new kind of exchange program, he announced. Not just of technology or resources, but of knowledge. We want to learn more about human adaptation, about your way of surviving. And in return, we offer our own knowledge, our own strengths. The room erupted in approval. Both species had gained something invaluable, a new understanding of what it meant to be truly strong. The Durex had learned that adapting to challenge was better than trying to overpower it, and the humans had gained new appreciation for their own unique capabilities. As the formal ceremony ended, Reed found Tom standing by the window, looking out at the city. You know, Reed said, when we first arrived, we thought Earth was a death world. Now we understand. It's not about the harshness of the world. It's about how you choose to live within it. Tom nodded, watching the sunset paint the sky in colors that would never be seen on Storm. That's the real lesson here, he replied. Every world has its challenges. True strength lies not in conquering them, but in learning to dance with them. He turned to Reed with a smile, ready to learn some new steps. Reed looked at his friend, remembering all they had been through together. Always, he replied, understanding now that this wasn't an ending, but a beginning. The universe had just become a much more interesting place for both species.